Good day everyone, this is Luis Lopez from the Common Catholic, and today's video is called Come Back to God, the Prodigal Son. And this story is for anyone who feels kind of outside of God's church or His grace, anyone who feels like they've been away for a while. But really this is all of our story, because in times in our walk, in our relationship with God, we all kind of turn our back on Him. We all kind of walk away for a little bit and then come back. So we're in Luke chapter 15. This is the parable of the lost son. Then he said, "A man had 2 sons, and the younger son said to the father, 'Father, give me the share of your estate that should come to me.' So the father divided the property between them." What he's really saying is, "Father, will you hurry up and die? I want all the inheritance coming to me." Nothing could be more insulting. And sometimes this is us because we don't want to wait for what God has planned for us. We don't want to wait for the inheritance that God has set up for us at some point in our life. We want everything now. We don't want to wait. So it says, after he receives this, he collected all of his belongings and set off to a distant country where he squandered the inheritance on a life of dissipation. That should sound familiar. When we take instead of receive from God, our life becomes a little dry. Sin is very boring. Sin is very empty. So this should really strike a chord with all of us. When he had freely spent everything, a severe famine struck that country, and he found himself in dire need. That life that we choose to live outside of God doesn't sustain us. At first, everything seems attractive and it seems like it's going to make us happy, but it really doesn't. And so what happens is, it says, so he hired himself out to one of the local citizens who set him to his farm to tend his swine. The things that we choose over God, maybe we're not being necessarily bad, but maybe we're running away from His will. We're ignoring the call that He's placed upon us. The things that we choose besides Him or other than Him, it's almost like we have to serve. And here, this man went from being the son of a great father, the son of a great man, who was to receive an inheritance. And now he becomes a slave. Now he becomes lower than the lowest in his father's home. And so he says, even the food that he began to feed these swine looked good to him, but nobody gave him anything. Coming to his senses, he thought, how many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food to eat, but here I am starving to death. We are all the Father's workers. We are all His hired hands. And in truth, He gives us what we need. But the issue comes when we want more, or we think we need more, and we get into this crux of never being satisfied. It says, so I shall get up and go to my father, and I shall say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as you would treat one of your hired workers. So he got up and went back to his father. Now, this is also something we do, because when we distance ourselves from God, when we don't pray enough, when we fail in our relationship with Him, we make excuses. We make excuses and we rehearse them to Him when we pray. I'll get there. I'm going to come back, God, just not right now. I'm working on me. I'm not ready. I'm not ready to come back to you yet. How many of us tell Him that? When God He wants us so badly. He wants us just the way we are. Then He'll work on us. All we need to do is come to Him. And another point, when we make this transition, when we feel sorrowful and we truly want to come back to God, it's a lot of swallowing our pride that we have to do. Imagine this man who's in distant lands. People in these lands probably know who he is, probably know who his father is, and yet he has to humble himself to get back to where he needs to be. And that's going to happen. But those who humble themselves will be exalted. So look what happens. It says, he has this rehearse planned out. So he got up and he went back to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father caught sight of him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. Now, when Jesus was telling this story 2,000 years ago, the room would have went deaf silent. It would have been able to hear a pin drop. In those times, a father does not come to one of his sons. His sons come to the father. In that time, a tribal elder or leader, you went to pay homage to him. He did not come to you. The fact that the father is getting up, he sees his son way off in the distance, and he goes to him. That's what happens to us. Because when we want to turn our life around and we want to change, God meets us there. He doesn't expect us to come all the way to him. He meets us right where we are. And the son said to the father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. But in the midst of this rehearsed confession, in the midst of this feeling unworthy, in the midst of this feeling like, I'm going home, but I don't even want to be his son anymore. Put me in the basement, put me in the barn. I will work. I feel so ashamed that I left you, Father, that I feel so ashamed that I didn't want to be your son, that I didn't want to be called your son. Now, how does the father greet him? He says, quickly, bring the finest robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Take the fatted calf, slaughter it, then let us celebrate with the feast. Because this son of mine was dead and is alive again. Then the celebration began. Now the older brother had been out in the field, and on his way back he neared the house. He heard the sound of music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked, what might this be? The servant told him, your brother has returned, and your father has slaughtered the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound. Now, that older brother is many of us. Because sometimes someone legitimately wants to come back to God. Someone legitimately is acting different. Someone legitimately wants to turn their life around, and we judge them. Who? So-and-so? No, him? Oh, I know him. I know her. They're an alcoholic. They're a drinker. They're a gambler. They're a carouser with women and men, whatever. Surely they can't be changing. That's the older brother. Imagine the scene, your younger brother who doesn't deserve the full inheritance, the younger brother who is not going to carry the name, who had left, wasted his father's money, wasted it on alcohol and women and money, gambling, carousing. All of a sudden he's back and your father has thrown a party for him. But the beauty of this story is that when we come back to God, we think that God is going to be so judgmental of us. We think that God is going to allow us in the house, but really throw us in the basement. That he's going to allow us in the house, but then put us in timeout. That he's going to allow us in the house and ground us until he feels like, we've paid. But that's not the case. He welcomes us back with open arms. Even more so, he throws a party. So the older son became angry. When he refused to enter the house, his father came out and pleaded with him. He said to the father in reply, look, all these years I served you, and not once did I disobey your orders. Yet you never gave even a young goat to feast on with my friends. But when your son returns, who swallowed up your property with prostitutes, for him you slaughtered the fatted calf. He said, my son, you are here with me always. Everything I have is yours. But now we must celebrate and rejoice, because your brother was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and is found. There's a tendency to be suspicious of people. There's a tendency to judge. But this is my favorite story in the Bible. There's so much richness in their story. There's so much beauty in the story. And if you can take just one thing from this story, is that this is what happens every time we fail. This is what happens every time we sin. We turn around and we come back, and God is there welcoming us. This is the story of how great the Father's love is for us. God bless.